Hello, and thank you for watching Ask Ron, where Ron answers our Gold Club members' questions each and every week. My name is Adel, and I have Ron here, of course. How you doing today, Ron?
Oh, I'm excellent. You want to see the weather out here?
Yeah, it's great.
By the way, in case you guys didn't know, you don't have to live up there.
And just a reminder, if you have any questions you'd like to ask Ron, first you got to be a Gold Club member and check that out at ronsgoldclub.com. Our first questions from our two favorite questionnaires here, Tony and Angie Stewart. Have you ever misjudged a seller's character and paid for it later? What signs did you miss?
I certainly did. In fact, the biggest one that I think of is I own the Salmon Falls Resort in Ketchikan, Alaska. Went up there since 1995. This elderly couple ran it. She was so sweet. She told me all this stuff about the village. I mean, what it is a village, 50 cabins and boats and fishing and beautiful restaurant and all that. I made the mistake. I asked her, I want some documentation. She says, honey, I got several things that I put all in one. I don't know how to give you that. And I fell for that crap, and I bought it anyway. Okay, with older financing. 3 years later, the economy crashed. That was in 2009, right after 08, and all the reservations just canceled for the next year. And I could see we can't stay there because I ain't gonna write any more checks out of pocket to keep the place going. Took it through bankruptcy, found out everything she told me was a lie. I mean, a lie. And you wouldn't believe it if you just talked to this sweet old lady. And it didn't matter at that point, it was in bankruptcy. But that's one case where I was really fooled by the character. All these years of going up there, all these conversations, became really good friends until it came down to money. And that ended that friendship.
All right. Next question. Joseph in Indianapolis. He has a question regarding your Pretty House Terms course you just bought, the agreements to buy. Why would the attorney want to change the contracts that you have prepared?
Well, I don't know. Why don't you ask him that question? I can't answer it. That agreement will work there, but if he wants to change something, let him change it and just let him add it on or add an addendum to it. But first you want to find out what it is he wants to change, because my lease option agreement from the seller is pretty good to protect you. It's got some stuff in it you're never going to find in anybody else's agreement. And I can tell you why he wants to change it, because he's familiar with the one he's got and he's not familiar with the one you got. And there's no reason to change it unless he can convince you there is. Look, every state's different, but I don't know of any state that's got any rules about you lease opting a house from the seller. There might be some rules like, in fact, the rules are actually dedicated to you putting the lease option tenant buyer in the house, not from you leasing it from the seller for the most part. Texas has some pretty good rules on that. Can only option it for up to 6 months, but I don't mean I can't leave a tenant in there and keep collecting rent for as long as I want or give them credit for the deposit if they ever do get around to buying. Anyway, you need to, anytime you talk to an attorney, he says, I need this, your answer should be why. If he says, because that won't work here, your next question should be, or can you point me to the statute that where I can read that? And if he can't point you to a statute, it's not illegal. There's got to be a statute on it to make it illegal. And if there is none, it's not illegal. It's just that your attorney is probably not familiar with it.
All right, Amanda from Texas. When a seller sounds motivated on the phone, but then ghosts you after receiving the paperwork, what do you typically do next, and when do you stop chasing the deal?
Well, you can put them in your dreams, and they'll follow up for you for as long as you want to. Frankly, something in the paperwork must have scared them away. It's the first thing I'd ask myself. Did you send them it filled in, or did you send it blank? We don't ever send blank agreements to anybody. There's no reason to send an agreement until we have an agreement. We don't have an agreement until we agree on the numbers. That's what you're going to say. I'll send you an agreement when we know how to fill in the blanks, and can't do that till I come out and see the house. But if they ghosted you, obviously they've gone cold on you. Still doesn't mean you shouldn't follow up by text and email.
Michael in Georgia, in this higher rate environment, have you changed the way you present terms to sellers so they don't fixate on interest rates and miss the real benefits of your offer?
No, hasn't changed a thing for me, except it has made some of the deals that we would have got with lower rates not feasible because the payment's too high on them. I mean, too high on a lot of them. I just looking at one a few minutes ago, robbed me a $1,900 payment on a $230 loan. That's pretty steep, even if it does include taxes and insurance. So, I've passed on a lot of deals where the payment were too high. And I probably shouldn't have on some of them because, we get all the other benefits of real estate, even if we don't get that monthly cash flow, even if we have a negative cash flow. But as a beginner, I wouldn't suggest you ever do a negative cash flow. So, got to pass on a lot of them. If they scare you, make sure you're using valid numbers, though. I mean, don't be looking for a reason not to do it. Be looking for a reason to do it. But only you can determine what your tolerance is for possibly a negative cash flow. And by the way, just a tip about buying that property, if you just figure out what your depreciation alone is, it'll probably cover any negative cash flow you have for a whole year. Of course, you don't get depreciation until you buy the property. Can't lease it, you got to buy it to get depreciation. That's a hidden gift.
All right, Sarah and Ben in Arizona, what's the biggest mistake you still see even experienced students make on pretty house deals? And how do you suggest we build a checklist to prevent it?
That's a good question. They don't really learn how to handle the closing call. That's where your mentor comes in. And frankly, if we don't generate leads, the rest of it don't matter because we don't have a business. Of course, that applies to any business with any kind of product or service. Most of the mistakes they make are on the front end, not handling a closing call, make a mess of their whole deal when they're on the telephone web. And then, of course, we got this fear thing. Our mentors work real hard to help you get over that fear of making that call. It's the first one. And then the fear of going to the house. Until you do it a few times, you're never going to get over it. You just got to make yourself do it until you do. And as far as handling the phone, that won't take you long at all. I mean, you should have seen Adel when we first got together. He sucked at that telephone call. Did he?
I did. I admit it. Yes, sir.
And I told him to use the script, and he didn't do that. And later, why we were using deals? Because he was making a mess. So frankly, he's using the script today, so he's no different than anybody else. He just had to have it available and learn and use it on every single call. Every single call is going to be a little different, but they're not going to be different on what I want you to get out of the seller when you're on the phone with. We want to talk about, if we get to the point to where they agree that they might look at some terms, all right, well, I don't know what kind of terms you got in mind before I go trucking out to their house. I think that most new investors just don't follow up on the leads they do get, or they mess it up on the outbound call. And all of this is easy to fix. There's no problem you're going to have in real estate that you can't fix if you figure out what the problem is and focus on fixing it, fortunately. As long as you don't guarantee debt. I don't ever want to see you doing that. Guaranteed debt, that's hard to reverse. The only way you can reverse that is sell the house. That's going to be on your credit, and it's going to be on your financial statement, and that bank is in control of you. You're not in control of it. Go out and buy all the houses you want with non-recourse debt, but not with guaranteed debt. But don't do that BRRRR thing that you've been hearing about on the internet. Don't do the BRRRR. That means guaranteeing debt. We don't guarantee debt on Planet Ron.
Derrick from Florida, when you walk into a house that clearly needs more work than the seller told you, how do you renegotiate without blowing up the relationship or the deal?
Look at it and I say, listen, Adel, this thing needs a lot more deferred maintenance than we discussed on the phone. In fact, it's probably going to be several $1,000s. So here is where, by the way, if you're buying the house for what the seller owes on it, which we do quite often, there's no place for the seller to actually give you credit for the shape it's in. So you're going to have to do the work. And that means you need some good amount of equity in it. So if the seller's not getting any money, then there's nothing to negotiate because you can't take it out. Nothing comes out of nothing. Seller is getting money, then we can reduce that down to nothing or close to it, with plenty of money to actually do the little work that the house needs. Usually is painting or carpet or something like that, or all the above. So it's a case by case. You got to decide to yourself, how much have I got to put into this property to get a tenant buyer in it? And there's a good chance that I'm going to get more than that from a tenant buyer. And if those numbers don't appeal to you, then you're probably going to pass unless the seller wants to do the work. And they probably don't, or it already be done. So it's case by case. That's why you got a mentor. Get on the phone with your mentor and show them some pictures of the house, and then you can discuss it when you have the real numbers in your hand.
Last question, Laura in Colorado. With Dreams and other AI tools finding more leads than we can personally touch, how do you decide which prospects deserve your time on the phone and which should be automated follow-up only?
You should call all of them. All of them. Think about your script. It's one paragraph long and screens them out very quickly. Something like, by the way, I sometimes pay cash for houses, and sometimes I just take over the payments until the debt is paid off. The seller always gets more money on the term deal than they do on the cash deal because it's going to be very low to make sense. So do you want to hear other options other than cash? And if they say no, call is over. Call is over. How long is it going to take? Okay, a 2-minute call. If they say yes, then you go on down my script and give them all the benefits of doing deals with you. And then when you get through that, if they're still in, you switch over to my 3 multi-million-dollar questions, which are, is that the best you can do on the price? And we usually buy with nothing down, okay? And I assume you're okay with me making your payments until you're paid off in the future. Yes? Okay? Those are 3 big questions right there. If you don't pass that test, there's no reason to go any further, okay? So your first big script, then a little script, then a little script, and last one is the appointment script to get you in the house. Now, you can find these on our Gold Club. They're under resources. Go up in a box, and all those scripts are right there. Put in scripts.
All right, that's all of our questions. Some good questions today, so keep them coming.
All right. See you guys next week. Better get moving. Year's going by fast.